we make that assumption of consumers acting on perfect information, but that assumption is quite unrealistic. There is a huge amount of information to have, and we can't either access that information, let alone process all that information. There's a lot to move on. We are not computers ourselves. We just can't have the perfect information or use that information perfectly to make a fully rational decision. We also have these things called biases. So all of those previous limitations, they're really demonstrated by cognitive biases that are commonly shown by consumers. We're going to go through a bunch of them now. So we've got this thing called a rule of thumb bias. So a simple guideline based on experience and common sense. It simplifies complex decisions. It makes it so that it's a bias that we use so that we don't have to put a huge amount of effort into every decision we make. So an example of that is you might just keep on buying the same brand toothpaste time after time, rather than investigating new alternatives. So you're not getting all the information you can about the products and then analyzing it to make the absolute best decision. You're just following a rule of thumb. Another is the anchoring bias. Now, I really like this one. This involves using the first piece of information that a consumer sees to inform their decision. So they did a study on this, and there was a special price on cans of soup. And they wanted to test how the way it's presented is going to change consumers' behavior. So they just had the special price. It was a good price. They found that 3.3 cans per customer were sold, so it must have been a great price. But then they tried something, and they put a big sign on it said that there was a limit of 12 cans per customer. This increased the sales to 7 cans per customer. Right? So it wasn't anything inherent about the soup. People didn't want soup more. But the way the decision was framed, by putting a limit on it, it implied that this is such a great deal that all these other people are coming in, filling up their trolleys, and we've had to stop them from doing it. So it can make a big difference to how we make our decisions. And a framing bias. A lot of these biases are similar. A framing bias is when consumers make choices depending on how the choice is presented to them. So I'll give you a couple of examples here. You're buying medicine. You might have an advertising on it saying it's 90% effective. Now, that is kind of the same as saying there's a 10% mortality rate, that it'll cure 90% of people. It won't cure 10%, but you're much more likely to buy it if it's advertising a 90% effective result than a 10% mortality rate. Now, coming back to the jeans example, you buy a pair of jeans. The way that decision is framed by the store you're in can make a difference as well. So if you're buying those jeans from Kmart, they might be the exact same pair of jeans, hypothetically. You're not going to think they're as good if they're in Kmart. Whereas if you see them in a high-end store, a high-priced store like Caliber, then you see them for that same price. You think they're marked down from $200, these $30 jeans. You don't look twice at them at Kmart because they're Kmart jeans. But here, $30 jeans, you think, well, these are probably actually good. So you buy them. Availability bias. This is when consumers rely more heavily on information that is most recently available, or it's readily available, easily comes to mind. So an example of this is you might buy the washing powder or washing liquid that you've seen advertised on TV. You think of washing powder, you might think of cold powder, right? So you're more likely to buy that. You're not analyzing all the information about these products, going through reviews and whatnot, because you might not have heard of Radiance because they don't advertise as much. Same with people's irrationality about flying in planes. Air crashes are big news when they happen. So in our mind, we tend to think that they happen more often than they actually do. Most of us don't really have an understanding of the sheer number of plane flights that there are every day. We hear about the crashes and we think they're much more common than they are. So we as a society get a bit more anxious about plane flights, but they're extremely safe, of course. Okay, choice architecture. This is the design of the ways and environments in which people make choices. So this is what firms and perhaps governments can do to influence the choices that customers make. So we understand their biases and we might take advantage of them in a way. One way of doing this is presenting a default choice. So this pushes people in the direction of making a choice because it's what results when a choice is not made. So you might get asked something. If you don't make a choice, there's a default. An example of this is in the UK. One must opt out of rather than opt into organ donation. So if you don't make a choice, it's assumed that you opt in and you're happy to donate your organs when you die. And because of this, rates of organ donation in the UK have increased. So they've changed the choice architecture and they've pushed people towards making a better choice for society perhaps. Restricted choice. This is a choice that refers to one that is limited by the government. So an example of this, you guys are going to be voting at some stage in the next few years. This is what voting for the Senate, the Australian Senate, looks like. There are usually about 50 or 60 people to choose from. Now, this vast amount of choices can be paralyzing for a decision maker. So sometimes restricting that choice leads to more preferable decisions being made. So you have two options here. You can vote above the line, just vote for a party, and then what they do is they can allocate preferences to other parties and whatnot. It's a complicated process. Or you could vote for every single person below the line in order. So you would have to vote from your first preference to your last preference. So maybe like 1 to 60. Now, a lot of people can't be bothered doing that. It's too much to think about. So they vote above the line. They're not showing their true preferences. So what the government did is, what you could do now was number boxes above the line for your choice so that it's not up to the parties where your vote goes, it's up to you. Or you can number at least 12 below, so your first 12 preferences are counted accurately. And what this finds is that voters are more likely to vote for individuals if they don't have to number all boxes below the line. So they're showing their true choices, which is what we want when we vote for our elected leaders. Okay, and lastly is a mandated choice option. So this is a choice that is made compulsory. The answer isn't compulsory, making the choice can be compulsory. For example, this is from Queensland, so this is Australia. Many countries make it compulsory to elect whether or not they will be an organ donor on things like driver's license applications. That's the sort of thing you guys are going through at the moment, so you might know what it looks like for South Australia. Nudges. Influencing people's choices is described as a nudge. So influencing choices in a predictable way, and that's not just by giving them money or imposing penalties for doing things or limiting choice. It's nudging people towards making voluntary choices. So we'll look at some examples of that. So one way to get people to increase consumption, which is what businesses want you to do, is you might advertise a monthly rate rather than a yearly cost. So Netflix would be an example of that. I can't even remember how much it is per month, like $15 maybe. That looks like a lot more when it's a year, and people might go, oh, no, that's too much. I'm not going to do that. But when it's a month, it doesn't seem like as much money, so you're more likely to buy it. This is one that was done at my previous school, which I thought was actually really clever. You reframe the decisions of people. So there was a group who went around and they put this on every light switch in every classroom in the school. Instead of the normal decision, which is, should there be more light in this room? The decision became, do I want to contribute to climate change or not? Which is reframes the decision, and this definitely worked on me. I definitely started leaving the lights off in classrooms a lot more and relied more on natural light, because this made me think every time I went to switch on a light. Okay, a couple of other examples. The relative pricing can nudge consumers towards the producer's preferred sale. So this sort of pricing of takeaway coffee is typical. $3.50 small, $4.50 for medium, $5 for large. Now, the difference, there's 50-cent difference between medium and large, $1 between small and medium. So you might not want a small, but suddenly medium doesn't look like a good deal the way they've framed it with the prices. So $5 seems like the best option. So you might not have wanted to buy a large coffee, but you've gone to the shop and it seemed to you like it's the best decision. So you've been nudged towards making a decision you might not otherwise have done. And appealing to norms is what I would call this one. The SA government, they require energy retailers to show consumption comparisons. So how much electricity do you use compared to the average household of your size? So you see here, they've got your home, one person, two people. That's what the norm is in your area, homes in your area. People like to think that they're pretty similar to other people. They don't want to think that they use more electricity than other families of the same size. So this is going to influence them to change their behavior, perhaps to reduce their electricity consumption.